Hey there, Natalie Teston, family law lawyer in Northeast Georgia, here today to talk to you about temporary protective orders, or TPOs, as they're also commonly known. So, who can get a temporary protective order? Well, temporary protective orders are designed to bring about a cessation of family violence. So, the parties have to be somewhat family members in order to qualify. So, the parties have to be either past or present spouses, parents of the same child, parents versus children, step-parents versus stepchildren, foster parents versus foster children, folks that have lived under the same roof or folks that are currently living under the same roof. Those are the folks that are going to qualify for a temporary protective order. Now, if you're having some trouble with a neighbor or a coworker or somebody else that's not in those classes of people, then you're going to need to go the route of temporary restraining order. That's going to be a TRO. So most of the time in our family law cases, we're dealing with TPOs because we're dealing with family issues, and so they qualify. So what is an act of family violence that this temporary protective order is supposed to bring about an end to and prevent going forward? Well, family violence is defined in our code as any commission of any felony or the commission of a limited group of misdemeanors between these classes of folks. So the misdemeanors are going to be battery, simple battery, assault, simple assault, criminal trespass to property, unlawful restraint, that type of thing. So how do you get a TPO? The petitioner will go to the courthouse typically and meet with legal advocates that are at the courthouse. And the legal advocates assist the petitioner in filling out the petition and the paperwork, getting it filed, and typically there are judges that are on call that will hear from the petitioner immediately that day. And what happens then is called an ex parte hearing, meaning we are without one party to the case. So it's just going to be the petitioner with the somewhat assistance of the legal advocates telling the judge what's going on and why they need an immediate order of protection at that point. And so the court, if the court finds that the petitioner has met their burden, will issue an immediate ex parte TPO. The petitioner leaves the courthouse with an order of protection in hand. They can be escorted from the courthouse by the sheriff's department to the home to get some items if they need to grab some stuff and leave. And the sheriff's office also takes off to try to serve the defendant as soon as possible, because there's probably some terms in that TPO that the defendant needs to be made aware of ASAP. And the ex parte order will remain in effect between 10 and 30 days. And the ex parte order will also have the final hearing date on the order, so that it's made clear to everybody from the outset when the court will hear the case. And at that point, it won't be ex parte. The court will give the chance for everyone, both parties, to come in, testify, present evidence, cross-examine each other, so the court can get the full side of the story. And at the final hearing, the court can keep in place the TPO, can modify the original order to loosen some things, add some extra protections, or can dismiss it outright if the petitioner doesn't meet the burden, or if after hearing the other side of the story, the court feels like the TPO should not be granted. So what do you have to prove in order to obtain a TPO? It's a two-pronged test. First prong is you've got to prove to the court that probable cause exists that an act of family violence occurred. And then two, you've got to prove that an act of family violence is likely to happen again. So in these cases, showing a pattern, a history is relevant, because that kind of helps us to show, well, this is what's led up to this. This is likely this pattern's going to continue into the future. Many times TPOs do accompany divorce cases or modification of child custody cases, because usually if something this big is popping off, then we need to do things on a longer term basis as well. A temporary protective order, really the court can issue a 12-month order at that final hearing if things are still happening, or if the original case was severe enough, maybe something else has happened in the meantime, the court can extend that to a 3-year, to a permanent, or anything really that the court finds is best based on the evidence. But again, generally you're going to get a 12-month order out of a temporary protective order case. So in cases where folks are married, 12 months of protection doesn't usually solve all problems. Usually we need to file a divorce case and kind of have that running after we get the immediate protection. Or in a case where maybe it's a parent versus a child, type of battery situation. Well, that's a great band-aid over the situation for about 12 months, but we need to head off on a modification to get a longer lasting permanent resolution to the issues that are going on. So what can a court do in the confines of a temporary protective order? Well, it looks like a lot of our other family law orders. The court can grant possession of a residence or either evict someone out in the case that perhaps both parties were living together prior to the order. The court can issue a temporary custody arrangement, can order support on a TPO basis. The court can order psychological counseling, issue fees, do a whole bunch of things that look very, very similar to our orders in divorce cases and other child custody cases. So that it's sort of a band-aid and it can address a lot of issues. But again, the problem with just living under a TPO is that eventually it will expire if there's no new acts of family violence or no violations of that order in the meantime before it does expire. So it's a great start. It's a great way to get immediate protection in a very serious case. You know, the idea from the legislature is that they've made this process, especially on the front end, very quick, very easy, because the thought is that by doing that, we can save lives, but it's not a forever solution to your problems. If you want to talk about TPOs in more detail in the state of Georgia, and particularly Northeast Georgia, give us a call. Thanks, everyone.